And while the Obamacare rollout continues in 2014, perhaps the Obama administration will finally decide the fate of the Keystone pipeline. And yesterday's North Dakota train derailment could provide fuel for both sides of this debate. Officials urged more than 2,000 North Dakota residents to flee possibly toxic fumes from a massive fire that appears to be the result of a train carrying crude oil hitting a grain car. This is the fourth major North American derailment in 6 months by trains transporting crude. So, are accidents like this making a case for the Keystone pipeline? Joining us is Manhattan Institute scholar Robert Bryce. Robert, do you think that this really makes the case, instead of transporting oil on rail lines for proponents of this pipeline to get it done, that this begins to make the case, these incidents, that the pipeline is needed to be built?
Well, Rich, it's a great question, but I'll answer it with a maybe. The reality is that at this point, Keystone has been delayed so long that shippers in North Dakota, where the Bakken Shale is and where we're seeing enormous increases in oil production, at this point, Keystone XL doesn't matter. These producers have realized they have to move their oil out, and they've chosen to do so by rail. So whether Keystone XL gets built now or not, we're going to see huge increases in the amount of oil that's being moved by rail.
What if Keystone is built? Are proponents really overselling this? Have they overhyped the economic benefits of Keystone?
That's hard to say. I think what clearly has been overhyped are the arguments coming from the Green Left, from 350.org and some others, that if this pipeline gets built, that somehow it's the end of the climate, that this is a massive increase in CO2 emissions. It's simply not true. Rich, the reality is that the U.S. has led the world over the last few years in reducing its CO2 emissions, and not by a little bit, and that's largely because of the natural gas boom and low-cost natural gas displacing coal. So this claim that we continually hear from the left that, oh, Keystone XL, this is a linchpin on climate policy, it's simply not true.
What do you expect in 2014 in energy? You talked about natural gas. Do prices continue to go down? Are we in a period now where $4 gasoline is just really a thing of the past?
Well, it could be. I'm hesitant at any time to make any prediction on prices, but what we're seeing, Rich, is an unbelievable boom in oil production here in the United States. In 2013, this year, we're seeing a 1 million barrel a day increase in U.S. oil production. It's the biggest year-on-year increase since 1859. What we're seeing now is an excess of light sweet crude production in the U.S. that's driving down the price of crude oil in the United States. So it could be that in 2014, there is so much crude being produced in the U.S. that it will, in fact, drive down prices at the pump.
Do you think the administration is actually going to allow the production in this country, the crude oil production, to be sold overseas? We saw the Energy Secretary say a couple of weeks ago that he'd be willing to work with the Commerce Department on perhaps issuing permits. If the administration did do that, what's the impact of it?
It's hard to say at this point, Rich. I think that the reality is there's going to be so much crude that if producers are not allowed to send their crude overseas, the domestic refiners simply can't handle all of it. So that could lead to reduction in drilling in the United States, and then ultimately, strangely, in fact, higher oil prices because there will be less production. But you asked about the other thing happening in 2014. We haven't talked about natural gas. I think that we're seeing clearly the beginning of a long boom in natural gas consumption in the United States, which is going to be very good for industry and also very good for consumers.
Robert, thanks so much for joining us this evening, and a happy New Year to you.
Thanks, Rich.
Well,